in in FB. So yesterday I posted a picture of an individual, Christopher Vernon Raider. That's a Wolfie from Southeast Tokers Trece, and that's a gang in Southeast San Diego. And this individual was a reputable, like feared, respected person who's put in a whole lot of work. And the only reason why I know that is because people told me about him, and he obviously likes to talk about himself. And so the photograph of the individual is my brother-in-law. I'm trying to divorce from this family. He is the biological brother of the person that I'm married to, that is the CPS worker. And there's going to be a lot of comments and different things stated. Um, so I'll do my best to give it a chronology. So that gentleman, um, he made a decision in his younger years to, he had two daughters, they needed him, he was a father, and he had an opportunity to make a decision to either work a job and provide for his daughters, or to hit a lick. For those of you who don't know what hitting a lick is, that's, a crime that would benefit monetarily. And so him and some other gang associates made a decision to go do what's known as a kick door, a home invasion, an armed robbery, right? And so he went into this place with these other individuals and victimized these people, um, and they were caught. Him and these other gang members, his friends, they were caught, and he was given a significant sentence that would lead to him doing roughly 19 years in prison. It's a long time. And I don't know where in the prison stint that he was rolled off into a SNY yard. I don't know 100% of the details. I only know the details of what his sister had told me. And her allegations were that he was believed to have had a cell phone in his possession, and that people of power and people who run the show, if you know what I mean, that they said if you don't let us use that phone, that you're gonna catch a pegada. You're gonna ow, why stop, ow. You guys know what I mean. And so he alleges he didn't have a cell phone, but I've heard other people along the lines, people have told me that that's either a made up story, sometimes from the people who roll off and go to an SNY yard, that sometimes they'll manufacture a narrative as to why they left the main line. I'm not judging, man. I'm like, if people want to leave gangs, I don't want people to get into gangs to begin with. That's the whole point of what I try to say. So I don't have any disdain towards people who drop out. Because it's a known fact that some people get lit up, or they get targeted for things that they didn't even do. Sometimes there's bad attitudes, bad decision making, whatever, and a decision to not leave the yard can be fatal for them. So I'm not judging anybody who does. I'm not here for that. Like I said, I don't want people to join gangs to begin with. Um, the gang structure is probably responsible for some of the most destructive chaos that happens in California within multiple cultures. It's helping the people that are profiting. I mean, we talk about who controls the canteen, and why people are now determined to be chattel, which is movable property. You have the abolition of slavery, the 14th Amendment, and then people. This isn't right, and people were thinking like, well, how are we going to fill that workforce gap? So unfortunately, there have been people were thinking like, well, if we incarcerate a whole lot of the people, and then we can potentially fill that gap, which does happen. Take case in point, Gavin Newsom, or some people who didn't want to let go of the inmate firefighter population in California. A lot of them were up for early release because they had done whatever time. And they were like, no, if we let go of those people, it's like, I think it's like 20% or 25% of the firefighting force in California. So for that reason, they were like, no, we don't want to let them go. Which I think that if they do go fight fires and risk their lives, it would be ideal to help them segue into firefighting once they get out, to have like a job that makes six figures, or they can work up, maybe have like a fire science program within the institutions, so that people who are doing time and go out there, because there are inmates that have passed away fighting fires. And I think that would be an awesome opportunity for them to like reestablish in life, because unfortunately sometimes people make a decision very young in life, and so it's held against them indefinitely. So I think creating programs like that would let them get into something that's like real, to be a firefighter, and like to maybe have made a bad choice, maybe somebody hurt somebody, or just you know hurt their family by not being there for them. One of the most painful things that I don't think people understand about people that are incarcerated is they're not able to be there with their family when they need them. For example, if a relative has a terminal illness, they may not be able to be there when their family member, mother, father, grandparents, whatever, passes on to the next life, or the burial, and that's a huge imposition mentally. So um, to be able to give back to society, I think becoming a firefighter is an awesome opportunity, and I hope they do that. But it, the contracts that a lot of these institutions have, um, where they're paying inmates pennies on the dollars to do these tasks, where they have these contracts where they make a lot of money. So there's a for-profit industry, there's the pre-release, and the halfway houses and the whole nine yards. I'm not going to say the company that runs it, but if you know, look up where the halfway house is in California, for Northern California, in San Francisco. It's in the Tenderloin. So every day they walk out to go to work, or try to like go try to reacclimate to society, and they're and throughout the nighttime there's people just all around outside, just using using. And so imagine if you're in recovery. I mean, if you're strong in your recovery, all that ain't going to matter. There's people that have suffered a whole lot, and and they're good. They're going to step out that door, and they'll never look back, and they will work two or three jobs. It's like, what I mean? There's some people that are like that. There's some people that will make promises to themselves and to the family and the others, and they'll get out, and you got to watch, because all it takes is walking down a familiar street and bumping into somebody from their past, a euphoria, a recall. They can, a certain smell, if they're battling addiction. All it takes is the slightest of things to just, huh. So if they're strong within their own recovery or their thinking errors, that's a good thing. And some of the institutions are actually teaching thinking errors and cognitive intervention, which that way, when they're in that predicament, they're like, okay, I know what this is. This is an activating event. This is the next is going to be the permission statement. That's why I call my YouTube channel the permission statement, is because there's a thing that happens in our mind that sometimes we'll make bad choices or good choices based on our brain giving ourselves permission to either do something good or bad. And once you can identify that, the activating event, and then you're like, okay, here comes the permission statement, and you have the opportunity to do a good thing as opposed to a bad thing. So after 19 years roughly of being on a SNY yard, and dude being 40 something years old, and his kids are both grown up, I shouldn't have to babysit, nor should my spouse or his mom. We shouldn't have to babysit a grown 40 something year old man that just spent 19 years on an SNY yard, right? That's reasonable. And we did our very best to try to like facilitate a transition, but into society. But that's his responsibility after he failed all these people, his daughters, his mother, who pretty much took care of him the whole time he was in the Bing, his sister, who all these people needed him, but he made this choice to go do a kick door. And no judgment, I'm just saying that was the consequential. So at this point, all the people that suffered because of his decision, it's like he owes it to them now, and he owes it to himself to like hold true to the things that he said. I'm gonna come home, and man, I'm gonna do this for God. I'm gonna do right. And so I was watching, because I know what it is, man. And it wasn't long after, he was doing really good too. but I was paying close attention because I started hearing and noticing things that I knew were red flags. And when I turned to my spouse and I said, "Hey, I have concerns about your brother." I didn't want him to get in trouble because I know that that would hurt her, that would hurt her mom. They need him, they love him, they miss him, and it's like he's back into the fold. Um, but there's also something called a lack of time perspective. And so somebody who's done 19 years, there's a lack of time perspective. And I saw it right there. And so if you do 19 years, the rest of the world kept moving forward. And some people will come forward. Same thing with the military. People may deploy for a year and then come back and expect everybody else to like lead off where they left off. But everything has moved forward. So if you don't understand the lack of time perspective, you're going to expect everybody else to check to lock into where you're returning to the fold, as opposed to you being like, "Hey, that time is gone. Let me focus on right now and move forward." And otherwise, they start making bad choices, trying to go back and change chronology, and you can't. And so I started seeing some of those behaviors. The daughters were grown up. He was going to Bing the whole time. Somebody else raised him, and he was feeling some kind of way that they felt some kind of way. And he started making very risque, laissez-faire choices. And I'm just watching and observing, and little by little, I'm starting to see more and more red flags. But again, I shouldn't have to tell a 40-something-year-old man that just did 19 years to behave. And I have a son that has a whole life in front of him, and my duty and responsibility is to my son. My duty is to make sure that my son doesn't make those same bad choices that he makes, or that I made, or that my son's mother made. That's my duty and my responsibility. But I found myself in this circle of people that have this attitude, this laissez-faire approach to like, you can't think like that, you can't live like that. And it's like the thinking errors, the weak-minded self-awareness or lack thereof, that it's like, oh yeah, you could. If I'm in a bad circumstance and I made a bunch of choices to get there, I can't I can't sidestep that. And I definitely can't hand that down to my kid. I don't want my son to go to gladiator school. I don't want my son to suffer addiction. And I have friends, good people in my life right now, that they're watching their adult children and otherwise battle addiction and harm. And let me see here. Hold on, sorry, folks. So now, before this dude came home, right? Um, his return to the fold wasn't the only chaotic circumstance. The mom had let a bunch of homeless substance abusers move onto her property, and they commandeered her house and property essentially. And we were showing up and like all these people that were exploiting my mother-in-law, but she was allowing them to do it. And then one of the substance abusers worked his way into the house and into her arms, and it turned into this horrible nightmare. So when the son came home, baby Huey, 40-something-year-old mama boy coming home, he could have just been like, I need to work, I need to do hard, I need to mom out and then get to a place of stability and independence because he took care of me for all these years. Um, and I saw he was doing good. He was working at NASCO. He was busting his hump, and he was proud of himself. And it was good to see. But like I said, I started seeing red flags. And before he came home, that house got hit. The mom's house got hit by law enforcement because of all those homeless substance abusers that she let move onto her property in the back. And they were like living in their cars and slanging D out the back of the pad and everything. And it was like New Jack City up in there, man. Um, and so when the dude worked his way up into her house and he got control of her, and then the son came home, he felt some kind of way. And he didn't like the fact that he could hear through the wall his mom getting knocked down. And if you're 40 something years old and you live at home with your mama, and you're living in your mama's house who took care of you for 19 years when you're on the S&Y yard, that's not her problem that you can hear her getting knocked down. She's getting her issue. But this dude took it to the next level. He started getting racist and all this other stuff. And I was like, I didn't want my son to hear or see any of that crap. And so I turned to my spouse and expected her to do something. But again, they enable these dudes, these women in the family. They enable the behavior. They make up excuses for it. And I was like, no. And the house, like I said, got hit by law enforcement. So when baby Huey comes home, mama's boy, um, I was expecting him to do the right thing, and he has a good heart down there. And he's been through a lot. But again, 19 years in the Bing, most of that on the SNY yard. Maybe that's why that was another concern. Because if he didn't go out there and suffer all that crazy hardship that them dudes normally do on them 4 yards or whatever, I wouldn't know. Um, Maybe that's why. Because I mean, and I heard the SNY yards got their own hardship and potential politics or whatever. Again, I don't know, but maybe that wasn't resonate enough that, like, okay, if I'm out here breaking the law, I could go right back into it or whatever. Maybe in his mind it's like, oh well, if I get in trouble, I just go back in, I go to an SNY yard, and it won't be as consequential as them people running around splitting each other's wigs open and all that other crap, man. That's no life to live, man. And so when this dude came home and all this chaos happened, I was watching and paying close attention. And I don't want my son to be at a house where there's D being slanged at him. If baby Huey comes home and turns his mom's house into a trap, for those of you who don't know, that's where they um, distribute. You know what I mean? And that's what those people did in the backyard. They had moved their cars into the backyard and turned their house into the Carter from New Jack City. It was horrible. And then baby Huey comes home, and then I started noticing the dude was back in the game, and I'm like, you better do something. And my big concern was that that he had a phone, and the phone that he had was in my spouse's name. And it's hard sometimes trying to explain this to people who think they know a bunch about what they think they know. But if somebody's out there doing stupid stuff on a phone, if they're out there doing tranza on a phone and they call somebody who the likelihood of is somebody, if they're out there running and being a goofball, the likelihood that they're going to call somebody whose phone may be lit up or hot is high. And if they keep calling all these people, so what happens is if it's the feds or the local, they get a warrant. And then that warrant's going to find out who owns that phone and who that account's in. And so if this dude's doing tranza on a phone that's in my wife's name, and that's connected to our phone, because all of our phones were together on one account. And she got out and she's trying to look out, my baby brother, I'm the little big sister. And so she puts them on our account, and this dude's pushing you know what I mean? If you're pushing on a phone that's in our name, you then are putting us in harm's way, because the phone's in my spouse's name. And when they get that warrant, they can go sit her down and be like, hey, this phone is connected to a whole bunch of phone calls and yada yada and a bunch of pictures and stupid crap. I can't believe this dude, man. I was just like, man. And if she lies, if they say this phone's in your name, whose phone? Where's the phone at? And if she lies to cover up for her, my little big brother, the little big sister, she's then obstructing justice, and she can be charged with whatever. The significance of that is she can be charged with whatever she's obstructing. And if it's the feds and they know what dude's doing, then she could be charged with having obstructed whatever the maximum penalty is for whatever this dingle doofus is wrapped up in, right? That's how that works. And so I was telling her, you got to get him off a phone line. Oh no, I talked to my brother and all this other crap. And I was like, no, man. And her friends hit me up and told me something. And I'm like, hey, man, you can't be taking our son into this. We already dealt with all the stuff with your mom's house being commandeered by these people, turning it into a trap. Don't take our son there. And then dude comes home, he's doing all this stuff, and she's like, "No, I talked to my brother, but her friends had let me know that dude was being a pendejo." And I was like, "Hey, man, he's man." And but again, like these enablers, man. But when it comes to the safety of your child, your duty is to your child. It's not to the grown ass dudes that done 19 years in the Bing and they want to go out there and try to regroup or reclass into something else. It's like, yeah, should have just kept working at NASCO. But one day I'm at a football game in Los Angeles with the two people. They're drinking, and all of a sudden I look over and my spouse is crying. She's like crying profusely, just I'm like, what's going on? I'm sitting there watching the football game, man. The Chargers are playing and stuff. And I was like, why are you crying? And this fool, this fool hands me the phone, and there's all kinds of pictures of the stupidest stuff you can imagine somebody would put on a phone. You know what I mean? And I looked at him and I looked at her, and he was trying to console his sister, like, nah, I'm a little fish and all this. And I'm, man, don't try to play me. Don't try to play me, man. They use when you go fishing, you use a little fish to get to the big fish. So don't try to give me that little fish narrative. And I'm looking at him thinking, like, man, he's doing this crap on a phone that's in my wife's name that's connected to all of our phone. And she got jammed up. You know what I mean? It's man, I was like, phew. And then doing it out of the mom's pad, I was like, man, this fool takes my son there. And they're traveling into Mexico. And it was interesting because he would come up to Northern California to come see us. And we would drive around to go do family stuff. And he had this music on the radio. And I knew what that music was. And I was like, why is this fool listening to this? He was like he was what they call jock riding. You know what I'm saying? I was like, why is he listening to this? It was a local gang. And that local gang was directly connected to the cartel of Mexico, right? And I was like looking, I'm like, okay, this dude's a dropout, and he's bumping music from act dudes connected to the call. And then he asked a question about Sayate. If you're listening to this music, you should know, because he's like, I was like, yeah, Sayate, yeah, that's Popeye. And I was like, well, and he said he was arguing with somebody or something. I was like, well, I'm nobody, and I know that they called him Sayache in Mexico. Popeye on this side, Sayache on that side. And but it was just weird. It just felt like he was being a poser. And I'm not saying the dude wasn't reputable, but it was weird because I'm like, why would somebody who's a dropout be riding around with active dudes? You know, like, this doesn't sound like a good idea, a recipe for disaster. It sounded like, so I was like, I was worried about him, man. I even said, like, hey, you want to move to Northern California? Come live with us. And but he kept being babied by his mama, and he kept and I don't have no responsibility to baby a 40-something-year-old dude living at home with his mama who just did 19 years on an SNY yard, right? And he was asking me questions about things. And I was like, why would you want something like that? Like, he was asking if I knew where to get artillery from, And I was like, no, hell no. I'm a Uber driver. I drive wine tours. I live in peace. Why would you need those? And he was like, oh, for my family's rancho in Mexicali. And I was like, the rancho you guys are taking my kid to? So it's just like all these things just started like, red flag, red flag, red flag. And then one day he was telling me, I was like, yo, man, I don't want you to get caught up in no trouble. And he was telling me a story about he was riding around with this dude and they got pulled over. And he was like, oh, but it's, there was a strap in the trunk and blah, blah, blah. And they let us go. And I was like, dang, this fool really doesn't know how that works. What a DND is, a do not detain. Because he was like, no, it's all good. They pulled us over and they found it and they blah, 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 blah. And I was like, man, do you not know what a do not detain is, man? They often, the big people, the alphabet agencies, they often will continue to do that because they're trying to build a case on them. So they do not detain. They'll put a do not detain out. So when he's telling me that he got pulled over with this fool, and he's like, no, no, it's all cool. I'm like, man, you don't see that flag that they let you guys go? Like that's not a good sign, man. Um, but again, it's not my job to baby a 47 or 40 something year old man living at home with his mama after just having done 19 years in the bank. So it got to a point where I don't have no hesitation to confront whatever needs to be done. Um, and so the people in Napa County, to include the Napa County District Attorney and these other people, they scuttled their duty, right? They scuttled it. Um, and so when I'm talking about the DA, I'm directly 100%, I can prove it in writing that they had a duty that they failed to discharge. And why did they do that? The person that I sat down with, Alejandra Yendiente or whatever her name is, she used to work together with my spouse at a nonprofit. Now she works for the DA. So that individual was supposed to reach out to the people in San Diego to validate, to be like, hey, is this dude crazy or not? Is he real? And then they told me that they weren't going to do anything. They were going to pull back. Why? Why would they do that? Because one of their people, you know what I mean? Imagine if you're a DA or CPS or a judge and you find out that one of the people, imagine you're a judge on the bench and there's 6 other judges. And then you find out one day, like, what? What do you mean? One of the other judges got jammed up and was arrested for doing what? Before they were a judge? Oh, man. Does that mean all the rulings are no good from that judge? Ooh, that sounds like a lawsuit, like a liability. So imagine if you're a police officer, same narrative, you know what I mean? And you find out that, like, hey, one of the people on the team that we've been kicking indoors and fulfilling justice somehow became a police officer, but was on the opposite side of the fence in the beginning. What that does is all those prosecutions are potentially at risk. You see it quite often. And that's all they seem to care about, man. And I was trying to deal with it quietly, offline, behind closed doors. I sat in a room just like this with the lady named Jimena Espinosa. And Jimena Espinosa is the direct report to Alfredo Pedroza, who is the county supervisor. And the guy, like I said, he was the one who was wiretapped by the FBI. He was called into question about what's called the Walt Ranch scandal or issue. Walt Ranch was a property that was sought to become a vineyard by some billionaires, the Hall family out of Texas. And what dude did, he's a county supervisor. So that means he gets to vote on yes or no on a project. And he has been financed significantly by a lot of the people in the wine industry, very powerful, well-known wineries. And well, he had his father create an LLC. He goes and gets a loan from his house, then puts an LLC in his father-in-law's name, and his father-in-law starts buying up all the properties around that project that he's going to vote on for a winery. I mean, is anybody here going to think like that's not, questionable, right? And he gets a P.O. box and has the taxes sent to the P.O. box. He pays for the taxes on the property. So it created this conflict. And you can watch this on YouTube. You can actually see the moment where he was kind of caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Go to YouTube, here on YouTube, type in Walt Ranch, W-A-L-T, like Walt Disney Ranch scandal, Alfredo Pedroza, and it's on there. You can see the videos. The day that he voted, and this lady stepped up and was like, I'd like to him recuse his vote and to rescind his vote and an investigation and yada, yada. And she started dialing in. So that was my county supervisor. And I had went to my Senator Dodd's office in Santa Rosa. I didn't speak to Senator Dodd, but I spoke to his direct reports because I had spoke to Jennifer Yasumoto, who is the Director of Health and Human Services, as directed by the Ombudsman for the state of California. California, an Ombudsman is kind of like the Office of the Inspector General, the OIG. And so there's federal OIGs, there's state OIGs, yada yada. And so when I tried to deal with everything quietly, which I have all of this in writing, so the people that could have done something or should have done something, because when some dude wants to go live out a life as a narco junior and go do his thing, that my son should not be in a car with that person traveling into Mexico, traveling into these places so these people can hang out with matones, man. You know what I mean? Um, when this dude's a dropout, his sister did what she did, and the other, it's like, man, what the? One of them's a federal BOP officer. You got a dropout. You got one dude whose brothers are both law enforcement. I don't know what the heck he was doing, hanging out with matones and stuff. It's just like, whew, I don't know. I don't get it, man. Like, hey, what's going on, Jesse? How you doing, brother? God bless you. But a 40-something-year-old man just did 19 years in the pen on an SNY yard. I shouldn't have to babysit that dude. And that dude should not be taking my kid. If he wants to be a narco junior and he wants to go slang for the cartel and do all that stuff. Now, that's what happened with my father-in-law. My father-in-law, he's no longer here. But when he passed away, the whole family had to move far away because then people were kind of still pressing that issue. And when I left basic training in 1999, I came home back to San Diego, and I went to go visit my wife before she was my wife. We were just friends. And like when I rolled up to the house in San Carlos, all the women were outside like frantic because armed gunmen had just left the pad. I was like, armed gunmen? What the hell's going on? Seeing a bunch of my friends knew my father-in-law. I didn't. And they told me what it was. And in San Diego, it's like that. There's a lot of people that are involved here. There's a lot of people that aren't, that say they are, and they want to just sound cool. Like they're running here, they're running there. I lived in Tijuana. I went and lived in Chapultepec, and I've had an interest in life. So I've seen a lot of things. And man, it's not a joke, man. It's when you're in San Diego. I could see Mexico from my backyard. I lived in Chula Vista on Palomar and Oleander, and I could see into Mexico. That's how close we are to Mexico, man. And but thank you for the rose, brother. So it's just a different experience. But I don't want my son to experience that, right? And yeah, it is what it is. But my father-in-law, thank you, brother. My father-in-law, I had heard from people the things that he had done, but he was a restaurant owner. Like I said, I didn't know, I didn't care. I mean, there's a lot of people that glorify that stuff. And I was in the army. Like I said, I joined the army with somebody who retired from the Riverside Police Department, Sheriff's Department, excuse me, one of the gang unit right there. He and I joined the army together. He was one of the dudes that we used to go into Tijuana and go to Revolution and fighting and papas and beer and yeah, Balak and shoot, Baby Rocks, just having fun, man. Um, but he said, hey, let's join the army together. And we did. And then I deployed as a peacekeeper. He deployed to Iraq as a combat infantryman. And then he joined the sheriff's department, yada, yada. But it's crazy, man. I shouldn't have to deal with the insanity of this. But Christine Briseño is the director of human resources for Napa County, and she's responsible for hiring. And she was one of the first people that I spoke to, other than Alexis Vossmeyer and Veronica Piper Jefferson. But I wasn't doing so in a way to cause harm. And so that's why this whole thing is a big old poop sandwich right now, because you can't tell somebody they can't go to CPS if they're concerned about their child's safety for obvious reasons. If somebody's taking your child with somebody who's actively engaged in the very thing that already cost people their life in your life, and they're taking your son along for the ride, and this dude's a poo butt. And I'm not saying all dudes who drop out are poo butts. There's some dudes that are active that are poo butts. There's some dudes that are dropouts that are like a force to be reckoned with. And I'm saying he's a poo butt because he was taking my son, and his sister was allowing it. And she had lost her parental rights to her first son for being out there when she wasn't supposed to, when she was supposed to be keeping people from doing stupid stuff. And then she got arrested for doing exactly that. So these are two people that I shouldn't have to even have a conversation with about why it's not savory for them to be traveling with my son into these places and doing the thing. It was just ridiculous. So when I sat down with these people out of desperation, I went to Kaiser. I tried doing everything I could, man, but it just didn't get there. And so the people that I sat down with, that was the first question that Alexis Vossmeyer asked me was like, how the hell is she a supervisor? I mean, how the heck is she a CPS worker? I was like, I don't care. I'm not. Can you guys get us some help? It ain't working. No matter what I do, no matter what I say, her expectation is for me to travel into places where it ain't a good idea. I don't like unalivers. I don't like schmurderers. I don't like smidnappers, man. I don't glorify that. I don't think that that's cool. I know some people, you know, how you say, I know that my first wife's father, I know he put in a lot of work and did a bad thing. He would brag about it, you know. I mean, it's like, and it's unfortunate that he met his end at the hands of the people that he was glorifying for being working with them in that life. But it trickled down. The decisions that he made trickled down to his daughters, his wife, and everybody because they had to get up and move. Go Padres! Heck yeah, that's right. Go Pats! So during this whole process, people were unalive during that process. And one of them, Mariana, I tried to save her because we was visiting friends and she rolled in there and she had this crazy story about what happened in Colonia and Tijuana. She was telling me that her boyfriend got snatched up, that she was hanging out at some place, and that there was this like narco lady that had bodyguards and all this stuff, and that the narco leader lady had thought that they had took her cell phone, and that the lady left but came back with the dudes and just started wrecking shop, and that they took off with their boyfriend, and then they went to the house or something, and then she didn't see him again, and so she was like threatening the people to report them to like Mexican CPS, which I didn't even know they had CPS in Mexico. But that her boyfriend, they started sending pictures of what she was confident was her boyfriend. And I don't mean in the present sense, I mean in the past tense. And I'm sitting there listening to her explain this to me, and I'm like, she's like, yeah, go with me into Mexico. And I'm like, I'm on vacation with my family. I'm about to go to Universal Studios, man. I'm not a soldier anymore. I'm not a peacekeeper. And if you were down at a house engaging in conduct that's not none of my business, I don't have any obligation to go down there and try to, you know, do harm to people for them, whatever. And I think they clipped her boyfriend. And she was living. How much time? 4 minutes. Oh, okay. All right, folks. I'm gonna tap out for now. I'll be back. So she paid with her life. She was brutally unalived, unfortunately, because of that choice. And we used to be roommates. She dated my boyfriend. We all trained Muay Thai. We worked and did window installation. And she graduated from consumption to more significant things. And that addiction cost her life. And all these people, to include all the friends that stood by and did nothing, they didn't have the ability to like preserve her life by saying, hey, we're going to get clean and sober together. And so she segued. It's her responsibility. She went back in there. But I told her the same thing I told my brother-in-law, like, hey, why don't you come to Northern California with us? We'll help you get your life squared away. And she decided not to do that night. And she didn't listen to Caesar, who was the one who was trying to keep her alive, the only one. And she went back to that place. And they did her in bad. And so all this happening, you know, all this life experience, people getting smoked, man. Like I have lost a lot of people in my life to unaliving, you know, some by their own bad mistakes, some of them by other people's decisions or whatever. And I don't want my son to grow up in this. So whether you're a gangster, whether you're not a gangster, whether you're whatever, I'm sure most people could understand or fathom that it's like if you have suffered, you don't want to hand that stuff down to your children. You want them to live a better life. You know, if you didn't own a home, you want them to be a homeowner. If you don't have a degree, you want them to have a degree. If they weren't successful, if you weren't successful in marriage, you want them to be successful in marriage. You don't want to hand down those. Thank you, brother. So that's the end goal. But this dude, I don't have any responsibility for a 40-something-year-old man living at home with his mama, turning his mama's house into a trap, on a phone in my spouse's name, and taking my son into these areas of operation while he's actively engaged in that. And these people in the county of Napa, the district attorney and all these people, they could have dealt with this a different way. Instead, they're like, oh, this is a liability. We got to do something, which I didn't want them to do no harm to nobody. I didn't want them. But my son's safety is my responsibility. And when somebody you love is putting your child in harm's way, you have to pick your child over that person you love. It doesn't matter if it's your wife, your mom, your brother. It does not matter. Your child deserves that opportunity and the path in front of them to be cleared and not filled with obstructions. And we can't let people that are toxic and making bad choices because we love them because they're our brother or no, man. The child, they deserve a path that's illuminated, not with a bunch of stupid stuff in the past. So the best that we can do to provide that for them, that's our duty. And the county of Napa, it's bizarre, man. These people are like on the next level. So that's why they're in federal court and we're doing it. And I have to battle all these attorneys, like this dude, William Hallisey out of Sacramento and Porter Scott. Man, you think that they have decency inside of them when you're speaking, but at the end of the day, they're all about the money they make to do this. So they don't care about my son's safety. They don't care about none of that. They want to take their pictures and glorify all this stuff. But everybody's going to know that they have sidestepped this duty to allow for my son to be taken down there with these people that just don't get it, man. They're self-destructive, they're chaotic, and they want to run with these people and do whatever. But out in the open, they want to be seen as like something else, whatever. But so Allison, hey, what's going on, flip flops and cow? So the picture I posted yesterday, some dude said, "Are you sure about this?" I'm 100% sure because the fool showed me what he was doing, and his sister knew. You know what I mean? And so she still continued down with that, and she lost her parental rights to her first child. All right, I gotta go, guys. My time is up in the room. Bye.
Yeah, the next group is here for the reservation.
I gotta go, guys.